Imagine for a moment that you live in 2 dimensions on a sheet of paper, and your pen is on the paper, but that the actual world is 3-dimensional. You only see the 2 dimensions, and the pen is writing, and the line suddenly stops. Now, in knowing the world is 3 dimensions, you can see the pen be lifted off the paper, put back on again in a different place, and starts to write again. But seeing only 2 dimensions, and in looking at the paper, the line seems to run a certain distance and then finish. Then suddenly it turns up elsewhere, and a line starts writing again. You can make no sense of it because you are living in 2 dimensions. You can't see how the pen is drawing the line in 3 dimensions and lifts off the paper and comes back down again and carries on writing. In 2 dimensions you have a mystery, and there's no way in 2 dimensions you can grasp the reasonableness and the logic and the consistency in terms of the pen, because the pen is a 3-dimensional object, not just a line. Well, I suppose you could say a line is a 1-dimensional object in 2 dimensions. You now think of living in 3 dimensions, but really there are 4, or even 5, 6 or 7. How things can affect that which is in different places in your 3 dimensions seems a mystery. There's no logic to it. Yet if you live in the multi-dimensions that truly exist, you can come in and out of the 3-dimensional world as you wish, and write a mystery in effect, can't you? That's living. It's as much mystery, for instance, how miracles work. They're made in the many dimensions that God lives in. For us that live in the 3 dimensions here in childhood. And the 3 dimensions in some sense gives a clue. It's a simplification of the n dimensions of God. At a level at which we can understand as children. But there's many things that can happen here as a consequence of the many dimensions, what's happening there, that we can't see rhyme or reason or predictability of. In the sense that we can communicate to the multidimensional world, reality, in that the multidimensional reality can read what we do in 3 dimensions. Read, so to speak, see it. So in a sense, you can write messages too, but you can't understand messages from. Or can I say, if I gave you the explanation, it wouldn't make sense in 3 dimensions. There'd be great discontinuities and inexplicable changes and occurrences and disappearances. And matter might seem to appear and disappear and reappear somewhere else. And you think, well, that's odd. What's that about? But you can communicate too. And of course, you can be communicated to from the full reality. Interesting thought. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. We could attempt to go further and think of it more in 4 dimensions, where one of the dimensions is time. If I take time on its own, it's a one-way linear dimension. You could say it's got zero dimensions in the other 3, and that you can only go forward, not back. So you can't see the position at every point in time, only one point in time. You can only go in one direction in terms of 2 dimensions. You can't go back along the line, and it's a straight line. It's only a 2-dimensional line. No, a 1-dimensional line, yeah. I don't know, it's as if... No, it's not a line, it's just a dot. It's... I'm confused. There's something strange about time, and that you can't look at it all at once. You'd need 2 dimensions for that. Or would you need 1 dimension? I think 1 dimension is the dot. 2 dimensions is the line. What's area? Area is 2 dimensions, isn't it? Volume is 3. I can sort of introduce time as a 4th dimension, but it's a bit strange in that you can only, I want to say, go one way in it. You go into the future, but you can't, in our understanding, go back to the past. And I have in mind, what about where you can see the past and the future at the same time? Well, in that case, you're looking at something quite infinite, and that's a bit strange. So it's simplified that you only experience it in one direction. But it's direction on a sort of 2-dimensional plane. I don't know. can't grasp it. Time is different, isn't it? Is utterly different to length and breadth and height, which is the volume. But location in time is a strangely different dimension. And perhaps the full reality is even stranger still, but that time is a convenient situation that the simpler mind of a child can cope with and understand. So we have a grasp, a conception of time, and it constitutes our living. And indeed it is a very necessary ingredient, so to speak, in dimensions. If we call it a dimension, I think perhaps it's something quite different, because it affords the opportunity of life, of experiencing, if you like, different shapes in the other dimensions that we have got, the three-dimensional world. So the box is there at the minute, but it's not there the next, or it's crushed, or it's enlarged, or, you know. And it's a strange dimension because we can't go back to the previous shape. Only the same sort of shape in a later point in time, not the earlier. It's as if we experience a one-way movement through time. Forward in time, never backward. We simulate something like it when we look visually at a film and play it in reverse. It's very odd to see someone jumping, for instance, or a crash, and then see a crash in reverse played by the film. It's sort of strangely instructive, and causality seems bizarre because we're used to causality in a certain way, and we're now seeing it all reversed. How many dimensions is reality in its fullness? No idea. Is heaven, is spiritual life something of that fullness? Or simply a dimension in the, say, fifth reality, what God adds? You know, the three dimensions of space, the fourth of time, man's burden, if you like, that he can only move one way. And he lives in a story now, which is complex compared to simply being a three-dimensional presentation object. Now it's an object that changes through time, and we have a story that we call life. But eternal heavenly life is at the least in the next dimension up, and possibly several dimensions, or many, or even an infinite number up. But God is changed ever from glory into glory, and so are we. But at present we're just children. Well, I don't know, I'm only surmising, of course. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. I think I'm tempted to envisage a different approach. There's spatial 3 dimensions, which I want to say is a particular, I want to use the word dimension, but it's a problem in that it's got 3 sides to it. It's got 3 aspects to it: length, breadth, and height in itself. But then there's another dimension that's not just space, but time, and yet another dimension which, perhaps it's not best to say dimension, there's space with its 3 dimensions, there's time with its narrowing down again of a third notion, which is being. So you can be in 3-dimensional space at a certain time, where time is the 1-dimensional sequence experience. We've got a dimension for man called experience, life. Now, life he does conceive of across time, and indeed if he can't conceive across time, then he doesn't experience the fullness of life. He only experiences the present, not its continuity of past and future. So this sequence So let me revise. We have being and volume, space, and time, and sequence. And to appreciate the sequence, you have to have memory and imagination. Memory of the past and imagination of how it might be in the future, not how it is yet, because the future hasn't come. You've not come to that part of the sequence. You then get the experience of moving into the future and becoming the present, and you having more of the sequence, which having been is unchanging. You can't go back like you can with reversing a film. Run it backwards. In fact, of course, you can come off into the other dimensions and pick up the film at any point. If I run them both together, your being can't cope with the confusion. So being excludes everything but one point, namely the present. That's a strange dimension, isn't it? But what we're saying with being is it's not actually just in the present, it's just that there's an exclusion in the system as well. So there's being and three-dimensional space and time and exclusion of all but one, namely present. A single point in time. You can only experience time, one point of time at a time. You can't experience two times at the same time. In this childhood experience of existence that we have, of being. But God's being is across all of these facilities, and perhaps more, far more. You know, God is truly beyond our present imagination, conception, as children at present. And yet we are children of God. Our being is developing into His fullness of being, where we can handle, as He does, the many dimensions with safety and the fullness of life, so to speak, and eternal life at that. A state only intelligible to the adulthood that He has, or something like it. Much more complex than we at present can make sense of. Yes, there's making sense, isn't there? What we call understanding, as well as those other ingredients of being and space and so on. And we see them as a complexity at present. But there's an understanding that can grasp the simplicity of their interrelated structure, perhaps. I don't know. As a child, I'm utterly out of my depth. I'm in fairy stories now. The miraculous. Just like to say thank you, Heavenly Dad. Love you. Thank you, Dad. Oh goodness, yes, you see there's trust. Even in this elementary state of childhood, we start to find we have trust. When I cry, Mum comes to the rescue. Something rescues me. And it's associated with this form I see, gazing into my eyes. I wonder if I have eyes like she has. That she's seeing me as I'm seeing her. Well, have I got a concept of me and her yet? Not in the early stages, no. Just pain and relief for pain. Oh, it's a hard time, isn't it? And Mum has overwhelming compassion and rushes to my crying out. And by the grace of God, I'm given the power and volition to cry out at such times. And then miraculously she appears and puts it right. And she becomes an entity in my being, not just pain and comfort. Memory becomes a reality too, where I remember I was comfortable and not now, or was in pain and am not now. I'm developing, except I don't have the comprehension that such is the case. I don't have the grasp of understanding of these dimensions yet. I think consciousness, as we call it, which ends, if you like, in knowing God and having life eternal. To know Thee is life eternal, is in its infancy here in our childhood, in this universe of change and uncertainty, not knowing. Knowing by the knower, to know that is life eternal, is what we mean by growing up. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. Well, perhaps you can recognize our childishness by our profusion of words. And the greatest wisdom can be in simplicity and brevity of words, like God is love, or this is life eternal, to know Thee, the only true God. Or to know quite simply that God's name is Dad. To know that is to be on, perhaps, the true foundation, at least for us in our time. You could say, no, it's cultural specific. It might have been more meaningful for some to have said quite simply, Mum. That's the name of God. Perhaps it was at one time when we worship the female gods. And perhaps angels is a hangover of that. I tended to think angels were female. But apparently the Christian religion saw them as male, like Gabriel and so on. Bit surprising that. I thought they were all beautiful females. Fairies, in fact. I mean, fairies are female. Gnomes and goblins, they're male. Well, I suppose gnomes are male and goblins are, trouble. Gnomes could be your friend. Yeah. Thank you, Heavenly Dad. You see, Mum in her bias built in a particular male-female gender view of the imaginary world of angels and fairies compared to gnomes and goblins. We didn't have demons, of course. They're satanic adult creation. And we kept those definitely from children. We don't talk about that sort of thing. We keep things from children, like extreme death, hardship and so on, death and the ravages of illness and so, poverty and so on. We try to give the child the Buddha upbringing of not seeing the harsh realities of what's out there beyond the home, the palace. We do it in the hope of steering him in what we think to be his best future. But we need really to have God's understanding of what's the best future. And that comes of knowing the contrast between good and bad. I've talked on too long, and it's a sure sign I'm very unsure of what I'm talking about. It's what I choose to believe, and with good reason, because I've found that blesses me the most. What do you find blesses you the most? Is it criticism of all that's wrong in the world? Is it a balanced view of good and evil? Or is it a view of nothing but good? The Buddha story says you need both. You need to start with the good, then experience the evil, pain, illness if you like, old age and death. The evil's outside the palace. And then, in the quandary that this contrast gives you, break through to enlightenment, understanding if you like, peace, ecstatic, full state of being, enlightenment, life eternal. Jesus' story has it in a different way, which the Christians have interpreted moving from sin to forgiveness. Whereas our experience is moving from ignorance to understanding. And after all, the Jesus story does say, this is life eternal, to know thee, to know, to come to understand. To know thee, the only true God. God being the personification of values, the valid values that constitute God, his being and our eternal being, by his grace and loving kindness. Love you, Heavenly Dad. Thank you, Dad.